Hello, welcome to the Mass PLC Community Workshop, Strategies to Reimagine Your Workforce, Attract, Develop, and Retain the Modern Employee. Mass TLC is the region's largest tech and most powerful tech council with over 500 tech companies who have joined as members in bringing professionals like you together. My name is Nayla Daly. I am the Talent and Growth Community Manager. This is the second of a three-part series workshop, Talent Workshop. The last workshop, which is coming in early December, will focus on employee and employer compliance, compensation, legalities of the modern workforce. And I want to say thank you to our talent community sponsors, ASAP, Hired and Talent Retriever, and to our globals. And without these sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have programming like this today and throughout the entire year. So now for our agenda. Here's our agenda for the next couple of hours. One way to connect at the end of the program will be through our speed networking feature. Once you enter the room, of the speed networking room, you will connect with someone and have three minutes to introduce yourself and expand your network. We will explain a little bit more about that at the end of the program. And with that, I want to welcome session 1. It's a fireside chat called Building Your Team with a Transformative Mindset. And Melissa and Alf, I'd like you to turn on your cameras. And with that, I am so pleased to introduce one of TLC's favorite people, Melissa James, who is CEO of the Tech Connection, and a new friend, Alfredo Mendez, VP of Talent Acquisition at athenahealth. Very excited to bring these two practitioners forward to you, as they are two people who are really change makers. With that, Melissa, I'd like you to take the program.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Nayla. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for having both Alfredo and I. So very excited to be here. I want to thank everyone for joining us early this morning. I hope you got your cup of coffee, because we've got lots to cover in a short amount of time. I've gotten a chance to get to know Alf over the last couple of sessions and going back and forth on topics to discuss. And I have to say, in 2020, there's no shortage of topics to go over, everything from a global pandemic to racial equality and racial equity, and then walking through an election year. So we've certainly got a lot on our plate, and I hope that you are caffeinated and ready for our conversation today. So I'm Melissa James, and I'm CEO of the Tech Connection, where we help companies with their diversity recruitment. I'll let Alf give a brief intro and background on some of the amazing work that you've been doing. Alf, do you want to give a little background?
So thanks so much for that, and great to meet everybody virtually. So Alf Mendez, I lead our talent and career development work at athenahealth, and it's basically integrating our talent acquisition and our talent development teams under one umbrella. I've been playing in this space for about 16 years, always in the talent, organization design, and diversity space. Prior to athenahealth, I was the leader of our global talent function for a large engineering and construction firm called AECOM, which operated in 150 countries and 87,000 employees around the world. So excited to be here and to have an opportunity to chat with you, Melissa.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elle, for that background. I'm super curious. Like, we've seen a lot. We've been around for a long time in the TA world. I guess I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what drew you to the Athena role? Like, why did you want this? And especially in this time frame right now.
Yeah, so it's a great question and a good place to start. So I think one of the things that was incredibly appealing about Athena's point of view in the talent space is really being purposeful around integrating talent acquisition and talent development. As you know, these two functions tend to be separated. They tend to kind of operate in their silos. And it really creates a sense of an inconsistent experience, because you may have the TA engine operating on all cylinders. You do a great job of bringing in the talent and getting them in the door. And then you realize that you don't really have the same aptitude or proficiency on the development side. And so you end up creating this effect where the talent comes in and then they quickly leave. So this gives us that opportunity to be more holistic and much more insightful around, what are the needs that our new talent needs? What are the skills that they're bringing in to the table? And then how do we actually use that to then be able to really drive their development, their growth, and ultimately with the end game of retaining that talent at the end of the day. And I think that, coupled with Athena's mission of transforming healthcare and making it accessible for all, I mean, it's a pretty compelling vision that you can get behind. And so, it's definitely going through the process of coming over. It's a gem of an organization. There's some pretty amazing people here. And so there's just a lot of opportunity to really be able to create this sense of integration and transformation in the talent space.
And then can you tell us a little bit more, Alf, how did you have to adjust with going remote, working through COVID-19? What are you seeing as some of the top trends?
So it's been quite interesting on a few fronts, because it's certainly that opportunity to, you have to reinvent, basically the way that you work, right? So on the talent acquisition side in particular, I mean, we've shifted everything to virtual. And so for us, even for our executive level hires, we aren't necessarily flying people anywhere and doing all of that. And so there's been a lot of education with our hiring managers and our leaders around, really being able to get that sense of understanding and create that connection with candidates from the very beginning. Internally, from a TA perspective, of course, we also have to engage with these candidates a little bit differently, and things of that sort as well. The other big change on the development side of the house is similar to, moving to a virtual model for hiring. We used to be an organization where new hire orientation was a 3-day event in person that had a lot of team building components. We've had to switch that into a completely virtual setting. Now, what has been interesting about that is we haven't skipped a beat in just the level of impact that we're making with NHO. And as we get our satisfaction surveys from our employees that are going through it, our positive scores continue to stay pretty much the same as they were when we did the program in person. So it begs the question around, if we're getting the same results and we're able to create a very similar positive experience, is this the new way of working for us? And I think that's going to be the biggest adjustment for us going forward, is really, things that we thought were going to be temporary in a COVID world. What are the things that actually we should really be thinking about making them permanent? And, new hire orientation is one of those things where we spend a ton of money on it every year. That money could best be spent elsewhere if we do the program differently and we're still able to get the same outcome. So it'll definitely set us up for a lot of interesting conversation and a lot of really great decisions to really make some of these short-term changes more long-term and more integrated into the work that we do.
And that's such a great point that you bring up, wanting to figure out what parts of our workplace culture are the things that we want to keep, and what are some of the things that maybe we've been just doing it for a long time, but we don't need to do anymore. So in this COVID-19 world where everyone's kind of balancing between hybrid, should we be in person, should we be remote, what was the end result for Athena, and what's the stance right now? I guess I'm curious to hear. I know I'm going a little off script, but I think it's just so important to kind of talk about handling this.
Completely agree with you there. And I think, for us, our employees are all still working from their locations and from their homes. We've got a very small, limited group of employees that are actually on site, and we have a very thoughtful process around how we ensure that we are fulfilling local regulations and that we aren't creating unnecessary risk. But even in the way that we think about hiring, Athena's headquartered in Boston, I sit in Los Angeles. And so, to really be able to kind of create this integration and to be able to kind of look at where we bring in the best skill set, where we go from here, that's actually the conversation that we're having with our executive leadership team, to really think about what's the right balance. Because as you know, employees are going to demand different ways of working, especially in a world where we have already proven that you can still be productive and that you don't skip a beat when it comes to the work. So, we've started to put together a strategy around kind of our go forward, return to work, remote strategy. it's likely we land somewhere in a hybrid, and we're able to be able to find that balance. But the reality of it is 20% of our workforce today is already classified as remote. And so
Wow.
We already have an opportunity to kind of learn from those best practices, to really think about how do we continue to support that expansion as more employees ask for it, and really as the way of working, really as they become more optimal, and we really think about things more holistically in that respect.
Mm-hmm. And thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I did not know that you were based in LA. We've been always talking on East Coast time. You must be really tired.
By the time 4 o'clock rolls around, I'm dead to the world, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Like 5, so it's all good.
Wow, holy smokes, you must be very caffeinated. I'm very happy to hear that. But super curious to hear. Tell me, so like now that you're working remote, something that you brought up was really important, is that now you have access to a much larger candidate pool, given all of these changes that have happened. How are you assessing talent differently in 2020? We started to hint at it, but like, let's double tap on it and talk a little bit more about how do you.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that we've really started to, the conversation that we've really started to have with our business leaders, really kind of anchors on this notion of diversity and equity and equality, right? And all of the work that has been really driven to the forefront based on all of the things that we've seen happen in our country over the last few months. Historically, we've been an organization where we look at the technical skills and this is what it is, and here's where we're going to go ahead and plug you into the various roles. The reality of it, though, is that we do also have to start compensating for the personality and kind of the soft fit of coming into a culture like Athena. And I think that has become really prevalent over the last couple of months, is really finding people that are going to help us achieve our growth strategy, that bring in the technical skills, but that will also be successful in this type of an environment. And so for us, it's really been around, how do we start to diversify our recruiting pipelines and our candidate pools? How do we start to partner with organizations that we didn't necessarily partner with before, but that give us either subject matter expertise or diversity representation or some other characteristic that helps us evolve on this journey of business strategy. A few months ago, we hired a director of D&I who's helping us build a D&I strategy that is very holistic around how we make D&I a competitive advantage for our organization. And with that, we see in the talent space, D&I is kind of the golden thread that we have to pull throughout all of this. So, not only is it around increasing representation, but it's also around how do we ensure that as we think about our development programs, that we're looking at the D&I lens appropriately. So how do we ensure that we have the right types of development programs for underrepresented groups, for our female population? How do we ensure that we're able to track that accordingly, and that we're able to say, on succession plans, on top talent lists, here's the representation, and here's what that looks like. Is it representative of us as an organization, or do we continue to fall into the old habits? And then really just this notion of continuing to educate our org around what inclusion means, and starting with the inclusive aspect so that we can then bring in the diversity aspect. And so we've done a lot of work around, unconscious bias, inclusive hiring, the traditional types of elements, but those were all foreign concepts to us. And so now it's become really, really important to make that an integrated part of our DNA, and to have those things be components that carry throughout the talent experience.
Yeah, and I think that's just so important. And we should talk about that just for a minute. Really wanting to focus more on personality fit, because I think that oftentimes, like, we were so tied to like looking at the resume and assessing a candidate based off of their technical skills, that this is like a nuanced approach, like kind of figuring out like what's the right personality fit for this role. Because we've learned that work experience does not just happen between 9 and 5, nor does my skill set end just between like a book that I learned or a book that I read. There's so many different ways that we can acquire really great leadership skills, and how it can show up in the way that I present at work. And I'm really happy to hear that you guys are thinking about it in a nuanced way and wanting to bring that to the forefront, because I do believe that's the future of hiring. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's going to be more important to look at not just your grade point average and how we assess talent now, but really wanting to look at what I call the new GPA, your grit, your perseverance, your ambition. Mm-hmm. I think that's the stuff that really matters. It shows that you can get through the messy middle, and so many organizations are in the messy middle of their journey, and we want that personality that can thrive there. So I'm really happy to see that you guys are thinking about this differently. I'm also really happy to see that you're thinking about it with diversity top of mind, because diversity is really important. And as we saw in 2020, many organizations responded to the death of George Floyd and countless other Black people in America. So I'm very curious to hear, what has Athena done? Did Athena make any commitments during the time frame? And what are they doing differently to support Black employees?
So I love that we're going and that you're asking this question, because I think, I'll be the first one to tell you we're still very early on in our journey in this particular space, but we've definitely taken this as an opportunity to capitalize on our commitment and really double down on, we fully believe, Black Lives Matter. We put out a statement. There's definitely a point of view from this organization, coupled with there is demand from our employees for us to really raise this as something that differentiates Athena's culture. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have a new D&I director who's come in, who's really started to look at our holistic D&I strategy, really to be able to increase this component around representation and creating this inclusive environment. But one of the things that we've really started to do as we begin this journey is we're really actively expanding our awareness of the experiences of our Black Athenistas. And we're doing that by gathering qualitative and quantitative data about the experiences of this incredibly diverse group. We've done data gathering in the past, we've done focus groups, we've had surveys and things like that. But, as most organizations have probably seen, the data sits in a bucket somewhere and people forget all about it and then nothing gets acted on it. And so this is our opportunity to strike while the iron is hot, to really be able to look at that feedback and develop new practices from it. And so part of this journey, we're venturing into posing questions around things like inclusion, engagement, attrition, and really looking around how we expand representation as it relates to our Black employees at Athena. And so once we have this data, we're going to be in a much better position to really then develop programming that's going to expand the inclusion experiences of Athenistas. And I think that's the important element. It's, our Black population is incredibly, it's small. We're a tech company. All of us tend to kind of have this problem. And so as we continue to go down the path of increasing representation, we also have to ensure that we're able to really create those inclusive experiences for these folks, especially in markets like Boston, which are sometimes very difficult markets to be able to bring Black employees to. They just don't tend to be the hotbeds for those, like some other locations across the country. So our goal here is really to be able to focus on ways to shift our practices to drive racial justice at Athena, looking at things like mentorship and sponsorship. We're looking at building out our employee resource groups, partnering with those external organizations, and really just educating our community around racial justice and what this truly means. But when we think back to this mission of healthcare for all, as an organization, we're really, we're really doubling down on and ensuring that, but also making sure that we can look at it from the lens of racial justice, healthcare, and health inequities as well. So how do we know, what are we using about, our knowledge around the social determinants of health? And then how does that help to support our work for one another in order to really be able to create these products that are going to expand all forms of justice, including racial justice? So a lot more opportunity for us there. But I think we've definitely begun a really great journey, and I'm excited to see where that is going to go over the coming months and years for us.
And thank you so much for that context. Hitting on a really important point here, Alf, and that what we're seeing is that it's really not just about equality, it's really about equity. And I think that might be like a nuanced kind of thing for people to think through, like, what is the difference between the two? We often use them interchangeably, but what you're describing is equality is giving access to opportunities to everybody. But our unique experiences through our lives, through what we've had, life experiences, work experiences, those are very different, and we need to have tailored solutions. And that's really what I'm hearing from you, Alf, that in 2020, tailored solutions to the problem that we have or to the unique needs of an individual is what we need. Doing the same cookie cutter approach is not the most effective way in 2020. We really have to listen and lead with empathy. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. And I see Nayla's here and back again. So we're getting the yank to end a very important conversation that we'd love to stay for. We could have had a whole day on it, but wanted to kick off the day with a few teasers.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Alfredo. That was great. You just hit on some really important topics that I wish we hope to dive deeper in the next 2 sessions. But thank you so much for setting kind of the lens and the context of the next hour plus. And with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for your preparation. And we are now on to the next session, where we get to touch on some of the themes. So thank you, guys.
Thanks.
And to our audience and our attendees out there, I just want to say that we need about 2 minutes to bring the, I feel like, I don't know, can you guys see me clearly? To bring in our moderator and our 3 panelists for session 2, talent acquisition from transactional to advisory. Like I said, it will take about 1.5 minutes. If you need to step away, take a quick break. If you need to, answer some email, there will be a little bit of a pause and a silence, and we will be right back. And also, if our panelists, Brendan Murphy and Liz Gormley, if you're not backstage, if you can access through the backstage link, that would be great. Thank you.